gentlemen, here we are again once more with another exciting excerpt from the Scouser and the Scot.
Today we have a very good friend of ours, Will Mayer. Hope you're doing well, buddy. It's good to catch up with you finally. How are you keeping?
Good to see you, Ian. Yeah.
Keeping well and safe, that's what I like to see. So we've dragged you on the show so you can talk about what your experiences are, what are you doing and stuff like that. So we'll start with the questions. We'll get straight into it. So I know you personally as a sound engineer, one of the best in the business. So I've seen some of your work in the past with Breed 77, etc. And that's where I found out about you. When I was supporting Breed 77, I thought, wow, what a sound. So tell me about it. How did you get into the music industry? What made you a sound engineer and getting into mixing and producing?
My story is basically a very, very common approach to become an engineer, a producer, mixer. As many, in the business, I started playing guitar in bands here in Spain. And I decided, I think it was 1997, to move to the UK. I started playing in bands over there. I started studying sound engineering as well. And, obviously working in other fields, I started to look for a job in the record industry, which was really, really hard. I think I knocked in every London studio probably twice. And it was really hard to find a job because when you live in your own town and you live with your parents, you can just go and work as an assistant. Unfortunately, I couldn't do that in London because I had to support myself. So it was hard. It took me a long time, to get a job, but I think I was lucky enough to get to step in Albert Productions in London, excuse me, which was, the perfect place to learn, to grow up as an engineer, as a producer, because I think I got the job around 2001, 2002. And it was basically, I started assisting in some sessions. I was producing some of the bands that were signed to the label. So it was a kind of growing up in a perfect environment because it was a production company. It wasn't a commercial studio. So we were very focusing in developing bands from the own label. So that's been my developing. It was, as I say, I started to work there around 2001. Unfortunately, the studio closed down, as many studios in London, for business. I think it was 2010, and I became a freelance after that. So that's been my whole career. But I was very fortunate to work at Albert because I had the chance to work with really talented people and have the perfect environment to learn, basically.
So can you talk us through your studio setup? So if a band was coming in to record with you, what would they expect to see? Because I don't think there's a lot of bands and a lot of musicians that will be watching this that maybe have never been in a proper studio or been in a studio at all. Can you give us an insight into that, please, Will?
Okay, my studio here in Madrid is like a residential studio. It's basically a house converted into a studio. Which I have a reindeer mixing desk, 64 channels. I have a Pro Tools rig, on all the standards, compressors, a lot of outboard gear that I'm not gonna go into depth right now, I think. But it's kind of it's obviously a pro recording studio. But most of my tracking I do it in the UK because to bring bands over here is not easy, it's not cheap, and not everyone can afford to come over here and stay for 3 weeks making a record. I do it. I would say that I might do like 2-3 records over here from British bands that I bring from the UK to here. But I do a lot of tracking in the UK in different studios. What a band can expect from me? I think I'm a very song-orientated producer.
Mm-hmm.
I I can't really separate the technical stuff from the artistic side of it. My approach is always focused on the songs. So I'm not that. I don't know how to say, but I'm not really that picky when it comes to gear or to. Obviously, it's important, and if you have the resources to have good gear, good studios to make a record, great. But unfortunately, these days, you have to focus. You have to bear in mind that most of projects can afford to go to a proper recording studio. So you have to balance things and try to get the best from from each project, because each project is completely different. But I will say that I'm more of a song-orientated engineer producer than technical stuff, which is great. I love it, but it's boring at the same time.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's a tough one, like, you know what I mean? Because as I say, you've got to keep up with the technology. So I should imagine that's got its own challenges. But if someone was interested in following in your footsteps, Will, and wanting to become a sound engineer, following it, like I say, and become a producer as well, what would you recommend them to do? What is the first steps that they need to look at? Like, is there anything that you'd recommend?
To work hard, to try to work with as many people as possible, because you can learn from a top guy, and you can learn from the newest person going to a studio. There's always a wide aspect in this business, in the aspects of recording music that you can learn from. And it's not like back on the day that you could get a step into a recording studio as an assistant and just learn all the workflow that involves to make a record. These days, I think it's completely different because records are not made in the same way. So you have to find the different paths that you can choose to make a record. So best way is to learn, trial by error, and just keep doing as much as you can. If you have the chance to work with a producer, just as an assistant or as an engineer, that's always a bonus. But it's not easy these days because most of the producers, I don't use any engineer, any assistants. I mean, I might get an assistant when I go to a well-paid recording studio, but most of the studios that I go these days, there's no assistants. There's no money, to pay a guy just sitting there and just plugging the leads. So to get into that role these days is very, very hard. So what I will recommend is to try to do as much as you can, work with as many people as you can, doing whatever. At the beginning, you have to do anything you can do. Even doing live sound, you can just grow up, the networking, which is, I think networking is the most important thing these days to try to make a living on this business, because you need to know people, you need to know bands to work with. If not, there's no chance. There's no, as I say, you're not going to grow up in a recording studio, becoming first an assistant, after an engineer, later the producer. That's very, very unlikely to happen. There's not many places that you can get that these days.
What do you think of what do you think of the natural attributes that would make you think that somebody has the right, you think would be able to be a good sound engineer or good at that kind of thing? What's the major?
The French. Sorry, the sound is cutting.
Sorry, what kind of attributes do you think somebody needs? You would say that they need to have to be able to do what you do.
Yeah. I think it's mainly first of all passion. This is not a business that you can do without any passion. Obviously, you need a lot of drive to go through things, because money is not good in this business at all. So you don't have to be worried. It's something that you don't have to consider into, when you start. It's a passion thing. So that for me, that's the main thing. That's the main thing. More than the technical side of things, it's about thinking that you can really help the artist to grow up, to be better. And yeah, that's for me, that's the main thing. If you don't have that, this is pointless, to be in this business.
So,
Sure.
so if we turn that on its head now, so if a band or a musician is watching this and they've heard your work and they would like you to produce them or to work with you, how do you decide which bands you work with?
I have to say that normally I work with most, 90% of the bands that approach me, because obviously the bands that want to hire me are bands that like the work that I've done previously. So it's kind of easy to know that, that I might be capable of doing a good job and that they might be happy with what I do. That's one side. So it's very, very rare that I will say to a band, no, I'm not going to work with you. Another thing is when I approach bands to work with, so where I really focus, apart obviously that I might like the music, what they do, is I need to see that they are quite hardworking. If I see that a band is really, really pushing themselves, to get their music out there, is when that really catches my attention. And when I normally decide that I want to really work with these guys, that's for me is the turning point.
Yeah.
But obviously music is the first.
Yeah, that's cool.
So obviously you must sit and review. Obviously you just said then you like to see bands push themselves and get their music out there. So you must have you must review everyone on social media. You must catch a few bands. And have you ever approached a band from that?
Oh, yeah.
I want to work with you guys.
Oh yeah. When I'm like in low time, because this business is like I might be busy for 5 months non-stop, and I might be doing very few mixing jobs 3 months. Is when I start to look for new clients and try to find new bands. That's for me. That's as I say, that's the turning point on thinking, okay, I really want to work with these guys, because when I see that passion and that drive is what really makes me feel like, oh, it's not that I want to help them out, but it's when I think that, okay, I think we can team up and do a good job together. And that obviously gives me an extra push, for getting involved with that band. That's for me, I would say is that apart from the music, as I say, is the most important thing when I approach a band. And I do that, I mean, as I say, it's quite often that I do that. I'm checking bands all the time, even live or on Facebook, whatever, social media. I'm checking bands all the time when I have time. So
that's cool. So if obviously, like as you said, and we've discussed this before, like money is tight at the moment, especially with COVID going on. If a band was going to work with yourself, Will, what would you recommend them to save your time, their time, and money as well? So if they're coming into the studio, what would you recommend that they were already prepared, etc., and stuff like that? Can you just give us a quick overview what you'd like to see from a band? Say it was a new band coming in.
Okay, money-wise, obviously, you have to be very wise how you spend your money these days when you make a record, because we all know, bands, you guys know that record companies has not much input these days in terms of financing records. So it's not, money is not just about going into the studio and making the record. It's you have to spend money on PR, promotion, making the copies, doing all the merch, to try to get some money back after. So you have to be very, very wise. You have to work out what your budget is for the whole thing. I don't think that you have just to pretend to look at what the recording is going to cost you, and that's it. You have to look at the whole picture. So that makes obviously budgets when it comes to record a portion of that, which obviously I think that is very important, because is the making of the product that you're going to sell. But you have to be very, very wise. So what I recommend to bands is, as soon as you sit down, and you start to work out a budget, look at the whole picture and see what you can save, which are your boundaries when it comes to making a record. Nowadays, you can save a lot of money in recording studios. Even that I own a recording studio, I will never suggest to go to a expensive recording studio for 3 weeks to make a record, because you can spend in a decent studio 10 days to do drums, guitars, and do the rest anywhere. A small studio, even at home or in the rehearsal room. You have to find the ways. I mean, good things about technology is that allows you to spend time making a record and getting a really, really good results without spending a fortune. So yeah, and I think you asked me as well, time. For me, time is always key when it comes to make a record. I rather, as I was saying, I rather spend more time making the record in a cheaper environment, cheaper recording studio, but I have the luxury of spending more time with the band than just rushing for 4 or 5 days in a massive studio and try to get everything down, because it's very unlikely that it will happen, that you will get good results. So I'm normally quite picky in terms of spending as much time as we can, obviously. But yeah, you can find a way. You can always find a way.
What are the common mistakes that bands, especially if they're quite new to the recording process at a certain level, what are the common mistakes that they make that you can say that if they address that would help them?
I would say that every band makes their own mistakes, so I don't think that is a common mistake that every single band make these days. It's very, very difficult, I think, to answer that question. I will say that one thing that comes across not very often, but time to time, is that I think that bands expect to make a record the way that they've seen it on YouTube. Maybe they've seen a documentary of how Aerosmith made a record in the 80s, and they want to go that road, which is great. I would love to make records the way that they were made in the 80s, but unfortunately, I mean, times are not the same, budgets are not the same, bands are not the same, technology is not the same. So try to mirror those records. I think is completely pointless, and I get some requests time to time, like going and making to tape, to make the record on tape, blah blah blah, this way, because they saw that Deep Purple made it in the 70s, whatever.
Yeah.
Say, and okay, you're not Deep Purple. To make a record on tape to do it properly is very, very expensive, because you need very skilled people, skilled musicians. It's a completely different approach, and I never liked to look at the project like I was trying to duplicate something that someone else has done or something that I've done. Obviously, I take my own tricks or my own approach. I like to take every project like their own, So depending on the resources, you have to take some decisions. And for me, that's probably the main mistake that I get from new bands, because from experienced bands, they know what the score is. They know how to make a record. They know how many days they can spend in a proper studio or not. They know it. So it's no fuss about that. But with new bands, yeah, you get that kind of, I would, it's insecurity, I guess. It's lack, of experience.
I think one of the things I remember when I was in bands back in the 80s, and the first time we went into the studio, we kind of expected just to play, and the guy that was doing all the magic would just create magic. And one of the things we realized was we hadn't rehearsed enough, and we expected to go in and write the music, when in reality, what you said was, no, you write the music, you rehearse it, and you come in here and I capture it. And I think that was, I remember that, get a bollocking off him for having that approach. And that was 1981.
Yeah, John, now that you're saying that, I think that's the main difference between bands. I started to work in the music, I play music early 90s, and we rehearsed, I was playing in bands that we didn't achieve anything, we didn't even make a record, and we were rehearsing every single day of the week. I think that's the main difference between bands back on the day and today. And I understand that to go to a rehearsal room costs money, that everyone has day jobs, so much more difficult to get together and rehearse. But that's the main difference between bands back in the 80s and now, is that they don't rehearse the same, because now you can write, I can write an album at home, send it to 4 guys, get together for a few days, rehearse and make a record. You couldn't do that back in the 80s. You had to rehearse, you had to play, you had to create the songs at the rehearsal, and that translates into tracking. And that's what I was saying about recording on tape, that a lot of bands request these days to track on tape is different. We all know that. And you have to be really good to do that. And it's not about being good or bad musician. It's about being good playing in a band, which is a different thing.
Yeah, 100%.
I think it's one of those where you look at it and you just think, back then you had a tape, you only had a certain amount of times you could record on that tape as well. So, like you say, the musicianship was, I wouldn't say it's a different level, but I would say you have to be on the mark to actually achieve, to nail it. The way, like, I listen to Black Sabbath, the old stuff, Queen, and there's something about it, the old style of recording. There is a warmth which is sort of gone a little bit with the new era. I think it's one of those.
But it's like you are focusing on the printing.
Yeah.
When it's not the printing, it's the head that is going to do the printing. Is who is printing that. At the end of the day, as engineers, we are just pushing things and tweaking things, but the performer is the performer. I mean, it doesn't matter if it goes onto tape or digital. So what really made the difference on those days on records were the guys that were playing and how they were playing, mainly. If you don't have that, doesn't matter who you have at the other end, because it's not going to sound. It's impossible. You just capture. If you don't have anything to capture, I'm not thrashing into bands nowadays, but you have to understand that now is a completely different approach when it comes to perform music, which is what it is. It's nothing wrong with it. It's fine. It's great, but it's different.
Yeah, definitely. So obviously we talked about bands coming in and stuff like that. So obviously you've listened to a number of people on Facebook, a number of different bands and stuff who've produced their own stuff as well. So do you actually listen to different people's mixes and go, I wouldn't have done that? And what would you recommend the common mistakes are for people who do mix at home, if there is any?
I mean, I have to say that nowadays you get people that do everything at home, everything in the box, in the computer, and it sounds really good.
Yeah.
So it's, I mix hybrid. So in my own studio, I have, obviously I work in Pro Tools, but I have a lot of outboard gear. I like to work hybrid. But I can say there's nothing wrong with mixing at home. As I was saying earlier on about being wise with your resources, if you can mix your record at home, you have the skills, because that's the most important thing, is to have the gear, is to have the skills. Yeah. And you can do it yourself. Great. You're saving a few grand on mixing, mastering, whatever. Great. The problem that I can see with that is that it's not about the technical side of it. That it doesn't really matter. You get a Kemper these days, and you can get great sounds, clone sounds. What you're losing when you're not working with someone else, a producer, an engineer, is the extra vision of what your music should sound like.
Yeah.
And that's the main thing. That for me, that's the main thing. So it's not like technical mistakes. I will say it's more an artistic mistake.
Oh, I like that.
You can make sound. I can make my laptop make a mix sound good. It will sound slightly better in my studio, but I can in the laptop I mix some stuff in my laptop. Fine. That's not the point. The point is when you hire someone, or is because it can add something that you can't. And as I say, a lot of people mix at the home. They do all this stuff themselves, and it sounds fine. Sound, I don't think that is an issue these days. It's more the artistic approach where those bands normally lack of. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Definitely makes perfect sense.
So when you're in your own time, well, and you just want to kick back and listen to some music, what kind of music do you prefer? Have you got a genre or genres that's would be your first choice? And you tell me what it is and the kind of bands that you like to listen to.
I mean, I've been, since I was playing guitar, when I was a kid, I've been always into metal, rock. I mean, as a kid, I was a metal kid, 100%. I was really into Maiden and Metallica, all of that. I would say in the 90s, I will start to develop more of a hard rock taste in music. And as a producer, I think I became more of a hard rock, classic rock producer. I do metal as well because I love metal. But I think I became a little bit more specialized in hard rock. As a listener, as I say, from hard rock, from soft rock to metal. Even though, if I listen to a good, really, really good song by any even pop artist, I love it. I love good songs. That's my main thing. If when I listen to a good song, I recognize it's a good song, and I love it. As a producer, I love a lot of 80s. Now I'm talking now, because when I was a kid, I didn't really like the pop music at all.
Yeah.
But now I can listen to a lot of 80s stuff, and I really think that it was brilliant. The hooks that in pop music you could get, they were brilliant back in the 80s. But yes, as a taste is definitely metal, hard rock. That's my thing.
So when you're talking about the 80s pop, what kind of bands are you talking about that you can appreciate now?
If I listen to Depeche Mode,
I was going to say.
I mean, so many. The Cure, lots. I can listen to so many songs from the 80s that now I think. I mean, not now. I'm talking maybe like 20 years ago. I started to realize that all that music was brilliant. Was really, really good. But it's more from a producer point of view than from my taste in music, because my taste has been always more aggressive. Not aggressive, but more more hard rock kind of approach. But this some stuff, a lot of stuff from the 80s that is brilliant. It's great. It's great. And I take that into my approach when it comes to produce also rock, because I think music was very clever back then. The way that everything was glued together. How could you work, the vocal melodies with the hooks in the music? It doesn't matter if it was with a guitar, with a keyboard. It was very clever, very clever. And I try to bring that into the table, when I produce a band. For me, it's like a big influence, actually.
I had to laugh because I've just finished reading Rob Halford's autobiography. And well, you need to. It's brilliant. It's really, really good. But one of the things he did when he went solo, when he first left Priest, he actually did. Yeah, but he actually recorded with Stock Aitken and Waterman because he could see he loved the pop music at the time, and he actually went and recorded about 5 or 6 songs with Stock Aitken and Waterman. They've never seen the light of day. He still has them, and he still threatens to put it out, but he said they sounded amazing. But he went from Priest and just thought, I'll bring out that music like Fight. But I will want to do this as well. And yeah, and that's because he recognised the same thing at the time as you recognised a bit later about the quality of what they did. And he said that when he went in with those three guys, he said it was mind blowing because they were so fast at everything they did. Like it took a tenth of the time it took them normally, because he just went, right, you do this, I'll do that, we'll do this, bang, 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 boom, and he says it sounded amazing. Yeah,
That's great. Yeah, you know, the thing is that when you're a kid, you follow, you just don't follow the music that you like. You also follow the you know, your friends, you know, the atmosphere that you surrounds you, and sometimes you tend to say, oh, I can't like that because it's not cool.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And after, you know, when you grow up, you realize, oh, fucking hell, that was actually really, really good. And if you're now in a bar, you know, anywhere, and song from the 80s, you know, pops in, you know, you say, oh, that's really, really good. And, you know, yeah, it's a learning curve, you know, that unfortunately it takes a long time, you know, to realize how good that music was.
100%.
So obviously you work with a number of bands and stuff like that. Do you go to any live shows, and do you want to shout out to any bands that you've worked with who you think we should all check out?
Yeah, I mean, mainly when I'm in London, I'm all the time going to local gigs, you know, around Camden, you know, the small places to check new bands. I'm fortunate that I have good friends that are sound guys. They do live sound in all the venues in central London. So they always, I always ask them, you know, oh, who's gonna play tonight? And you know, they recommend, oh, you should come down tonight, you know, to check these guys out. And yeah, I see a lot of good bands out there. So yeah, and also you know, big gigs. I became a little bit lazy in terms of buying tickets. So normally, if I get the guest list, I will go. But yeah, I try to keep up, you know, with gigs all the time. And any new bands that I've seen, I mean, obviously I haven't seen any in the last 8 months.
Yeah.
And I mean, the last band that I worked with, that they came over here to my studio back in I think February, March, was Black Tree Vultures.
Oh yeah,
okay.
Yeah,
guys from Bournemouth. They're really, really good. They are, I think they have really good stuff coming up. Really hardworking guys. It's a shame that all this situation has things slowed down, you know, for them and for everyone, obviously. But there are guys that definitely I think everyone should check out. So many projects that I've done in the last couple of years that they've been delayed. First of all, because the Pledge, I don't know if you remember what happened with Pledge Music.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that has slowed down so many bands that I worked the last couple of years that is insane. You know, the amount of albums that are going to be out, I guess, as soon as everything returns to normal, it's unbelievable. But yeah, I would say Black Tree Vultures. I did the last Voodoo Vegas album as well, which, because the Pledge thing and this COVID thing hasn't come out yet. I'm pretty sure that, you know, if I could think of more bands that I see in live, yeah, there's great bands out there. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's a shame that the music business is so down these days. There's so much talent out there, so many good bands. But as I was saying earlier on, you have to work really, really hard. And it's very, very hard to find bands that are really, really hardworking with all that involves. You know, it's more about management than just the music. And unfortunately, a lot of bands are going to get lost in the way.
100%. I actually, I mean, I'm 59, so I've been around for a long time in music, and my business is we manage bands, we're promoters, we manage bands, etc. And I actually believe that for the rock and metal scenes, I reckon we've got more great bands now than I've ever seen in the UK. I honestly, I've said it before, I say it again. the quality just now is absolutely off the scale. And it's just a pity that the scene isn't bigger, because we need to do that crossover. We need to make that breakthrough into mainstream and make it cool again, because I think the music's fantastic. To finalise things with you, Will, you said that you're not so much a guy for gear, but with all the latest plugins and things like that, do you keep abreast of them? Do you try them out? You know, how do you work with all that stuff and then decide whether you're going to use it or not? And when was the last time you learned something brand new in the studio?
You know, with plugins, it's a funny thing, because everyone has so many plugins. I have a lot of plugins. I will say most of them never use them, never open them, or so. But I have enough. The thing is that I don't really buy many plugins anymore. I don't think I have bought any plugin in the last year and a half, because I have enough. I'm thinking about upgrading, you know, the operating system, blah blah blah. But until then, I don't think I'm gonna buy anything, because I have more than enough. What I tend to do is, every time that I have a new mix to do, at least I try to challenge myself. And let's say I work with a bass drum, and I normally use this compressor, this plugin. I try to, at least one thing, try to say, okay, I'm gonna try all the compressors that I have in my plugin list and go through all of them, just to check out if I can get different flavor, or if I can learn something from a different plugin. But I would say 80% of the times I get back to the one that I've been using for, I don't know, the last couple of years. Because let's say you had the outboard, you will not have 30 compressors to choose which one you will use for the bass drum. So at the end of the day, to have too many options, I don't think that is great in terms of creativity. So I would say that I never counted them, but I will say, because I use a lot of like the waves, you know, the SSL channel. I use it a lot, you know, a lot of different things, but probably I don't use more than 30 plugins in one mix. You know, yeah, the EQ might be in a lot of channels, but it's the same thing that if you had on an analog desk. Yeah, I try to find new things, but I'm not really. I have enough right now. I have, in terms of gear, I'm more interested in my analog, to be honest, for tracking in my studio than trying to get more plugins, because I have tons, and they were fantastic. You know, they're great. I mean, it's same plugin that anyone can get these days, not very expensive. So I'm happy with what I have.
When was the last time you got some sort of technology that we thought was a game changer for what you do?
It was a few years ago. I think when Pro Tools, you know, when the HD system, when you were able to hook analog gear, to insert analog gear and not have any latency, for me this is it. Because before, when I started, you know, to use Pro Tools or Logic, I remember working in Albert. We had a massive NIF automated. So basically, Pro Tools was a tape machine. It was a digital tape machine. You had everything recorded in the computer, edited, whatever, and you came back to the desk, do all the mixing, all the automation, and you know, with all the outboard, and go back to Pro Tools. So you still needed a big mixing desk, like an SSL or a NIF to mix a record. When the HD system allowed you to insert stuff, analog stuff, and without any latency, you could use some of the really good outboard gear and obviously the digital together. Because the problem was that, yeah, you could use a few plugins, but you couldn't really insert. You need to go through a mixing desk, to analog desk. So for me, that was probably the game change thing that you're saying. It was at that point, because suddenly you could mix at home or a small studio. You didn't need a massive mixing desk to mix a record anymore. And if you look at any producer these days, they don't hire a 500 pounds studio to mix a record. No one does. Everyone has their own setups at home, and they can make really good sounding records mix in the box or hybrid, using some outboard gear. So for me, that was great, especially when budgets started to come down significantly. So yeah, definitely that was the last thing that I can say that it was a big step up for the business.
Yeah, that's cool.
I was just going to say, can you ever see yourself moving fully digital?
No. This is the thing. Right now, not right now, but this summer, I've been mixing 3 records, an EP, and a few songs, all at the same time. I was and to swap from one project to another, it takes me 5 minutes. Even using some analog outboard gear that I have in my studio, it takes nothing. So that flexibility, taking into consideration how bands are working these days, is has no rival. You can go back to tape. It's a luxury, and to be honest, I don't think that is any improvement, anything that you can really care. Yeah, it's a little bit of flavor, but it's not worth it. For me, it's not worth it.
Is there anything that would make your life easier, though, Will?
Sorry, again?
Is there anything that what you'd love to see in a studio, or some piece of technology that would benefit yourself that isn't available yet in the studio?
In mine, my next buy is gonna be 1073s, a NIF with the EQ, because for me that's the Rolls Royce of tracking. I haven't got any in my studio, but that's my next.
That's your next purchase.
My next buy, yeah, for sure. But the thing is that you never stop. So it's something that you want. There's a microphone, a preamp, a compressor, non-stop. It's non-stop, man. But I like it. It's something. It's you have to be wise as well with money. When it comes to spend a studio, because my studio is a personal studio. It's not a commercial studio. So it's like now I'm in Madrid in my girlfriend's flat. I'm not in the studio. The studio is no one is gonna be in the studio for the next 4 or 5 days. You can afford to have a commercial studio, not making money almost every single day. So it's more like a private studio. So yeah, you have to be very careful how you spend your money, because it's not that you get a piece of gear that you're gonna get the money back in for days, in a session. It's not like that. So, but yeah, it's never stops, man.
No, I think every musician knows that. You can never have enough guitars.
You're probably with guitars.
His problem is definitely guitars. And if you don't believe me, ask his wife. He could be a millionaire if guitars didn't exist.
I'm not. I'm pleased.
Your wife probably doesn't know how many you have.
You know what it's like, Will. You see something, you go, that looks nice, and then next minute you're walking out the shop with it. But that's a different story. So there you go, guys. Thank you very much for your time, Will. Really appreciate it. This time, what I'd like you to do is give us your links to your pages so people can check your work out. So fire away. Give us your Facebook links and your webpage.
Yeah, my website is www.willmaya, which is WILLMAYA.com. And you can check my studio in there, my profile. So I don't know if I have it updated, to be honest. I need to check it out. The latest music that I've done, and yeah, obviously anyone can contact me and ask me for anything. I've been trying for the last, since the COVID thing, I obviously put my prices down just to help most of the bands out a little bit, so everyone keeps, doing something. So until this is over, obviously I will be more than happy to help as many people as I can, if it's needed.
That's cool.
Thank you very much. What we'll do is we'll throw your links down on the bottom of the page. So guys, click on the link, check Will's work out. By all means, drop him a message as well, because this guy knows his stuff. I've got a lot of time for Will. I've seen his work in the past, and it's flawless. It's great stuff. So, John, it's over to you, mate.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed this interview as much as Ian and I have. And until next time, you know what to do. Hit that cowbell and subscribe.